welcome to the Rejection Diaries Season 2 with me, Stuart White. Today I'm joined by YA author Clare Golding, who was a mentee actually in one of the first Write Mentor summer programmes, and who is represented by Catherine Pellegrino. Hi Clare, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Nice to have you on. I was excited to chat to you today. Can you tell everyone who's listening, first of all, just a little bit about what got you started writing? Where was the initial spark to get going and write stories?
Oh, wow. I always tell people that I've always been a writer in one form or another. I started, as many writers do, writing as a child. But I used to write mainly sort of what would now be considered fan fiction. So I used to write episodes of my favorite television shows that were terrible. And I used to also sort of write sequels to movies that I liked. But then I went on to do other things. I've worked in film and I've worked as a teacher. And I think teaching is sort of where I got back into storytelling, because I taught social studies in the United States, which is a combination of history and geography. And that was kind of when I got to really like telling stories, sharing history stories and cultural stories. And I would write things for my students. But then when I was pregnant with my first child, I don't know what happened. I know a lot of women nest. I wrote a novel. I sat down when I was 7 months pregnant and wrote a novel and finished it by the time I was 9 months pregnant.
That's quite work.
Yeah, I just somebody asked me a question. One of my best friends, childhood friends, asked me what my sort of high school situation would have looked like if I hadn't changed high schools, because we met at the second high school that I attended. And I just thought, gosh, my whole life would be different. And then I just started writing it and I wrote it down. And then I thought, well, I can't be my mom, because if anyone ever reads this, I don't want to offend my mother. So I changed the mom, and then I changed the dad, and then I changed the neighbor. And then it just became a whole other thing in and of itself. And I took it to a friend who is still one of my great writing mentors. And I just said, could you read this and tell me whether it's crap? And we met for coffee, and she said, it's not crap, and you need to keep doing this. And that first part was a lie, but that's okay. I forgive her.
So when was this, Clare? What year are we in at this point?
Oh, that was in 2010. Yeah, so, yeah. And then I moved to the UK in 2014. And I couldn't teach here. And so I sort of decided that I would try to be a writer. And I've been trying to be a writer ever since.
It's a noble ambition, though. I think there's a lot of us in that boat. So that's brilliant. So you wrote your first novel when you were in the US still, and 2014 you came over to the UK. And so where did your writing go from there when you decided that you wanted to make a go of it?
Well, I decided to basically make it my career. So when I tried very hard, although it took years of practice and I'm still not very good at it, when people ask me what do you do, I would say, I am a writer. And then I go, I don't know, I'm not really a writer. But I didn't quite know how to go about it. And I thought, coming from an academic background myself, that an academic route was the best way. And I didn't realize that I was not allowed to take university courses here without paying international student tuition. And £14,000 for a class was a little bit out of my budget. And so I did not do that. And so I kind of asked around, and a friend of mine decided to sort of take things into her own hands, and she Googled local writing groups for me, and then sent me a curated list of groups to choose from of things that she thought would suit me. And I found one, and I took that novel to that group. It's called the Hogsback Writers. And I just took it in and very nervously read from it over several weeks, and then they offered me sort of a membership in the group. You sort of have to go through a little trial period, and that's what I did. And it just so happened that as I started that group, Joanna Barnard, who is a member of that group, won the inaugural Bath Novel Award. And our entire group went to Bath to support her because herself and her soon-to-be agent, Juliet Mushins, were on this sort of panel with the wonderful Caroline Ambrose. And I just sort of thought, this is it. This is what I want. I want to do that. I want to win an award or something and be on a stage and talk about books. This is amazing.
And so this is about 2014, 2015 round about now then? Yeah. And so what did you write? What was the first novel that you tackled when you came over here then?
Well, I started out with that really terrible novel that was sort of about myself, and realized pretty quickly that after 4 years of scrutiny and trying to make it better, I didn't know what better was. I didn't know how to make it better. And every time I tried, it was like sand coming through my hands. And it's just, yeah. So I started another novel. So I wrote a novel, and I invented a new kind of formatting for that novel. I don't recommend doing that as a first go, or even a second go, or a third. But that's what I decided to do. I had this great idea that I was going to combine fiction writing, young adult fiction writing, with script writing, which is something that I had some experience with. And so I sort of combined the two, and I wrote a novel that way. And I worked with my writing group on that novel. And then I started querying it far, far too soon.
We all know that feeling.
Yeah. That is actually generally the first piece of advice I give anyone who asks me about querying or talks about when to query. And I said, if you think you're ready to query, you're probably not. And you should give yourself like 3 months, 6 months, depending on how much time you're putting into things, from when you think you're ready to when you actually start, just to be sure that your content is ready. Because I think I started querying that novel. I mean, it might have been the first draft. And the responses were either non-existent or very brief. And I got the occasional kind of like, I like the idea of this, but I didn't get any further with it than that. And so I had to write something else.
And what was the book then that you went for next? What was that one about?
The book that I started next came out of a real angst at not being able to affect much political anything in the United States, being far away, and to a certain extent here being ineligible to vote or even write an MP. And I interviewed, so long story short, I have an extended Brazilian family. And I interviewed my baby sister's best friend, who was undocumented and living in the United States at the time. And this was when, not long after Donald Trump declared that he was going to be running for president, or maybe it was fully into his campaign. But it was a key moment for us. And so I interviewed her, and I decided to write a story kind of about her, not everything that happened to her, but taking her experiences and trying to frame them in a way that was both sympathetic and understandable, but also powerful, in which she was not a victim. And we ended up eventually kind of writing that together. Although when I began querying that novel, I didn't mention her for a long time. And because we just weren't sure about her safety, quite frankly. And sort of revealing herself, naming herself. She eventually came up with a pen name and all sorts of things like that. But that was more of a collaboration. And the nice thing about collaboration is that it gave me someone else to fight for besides myself. And so in querying and trying to get that novel noticed, I felt sort of inspired to kind of do it for her as much as for myself, which is not an opportunity every writer gets to have.
Very true, yeah. And so, did you start querying that one then?
I did. I started querying that one, and I struggled a little bit with it because I knew that it was probably best for that to go into an American market. But all my querying experience thus far had been in the UK, and they are different. And the tone of query letters between the UK and the United States is different. And so it was sort of like almost like I had to start over learning how to write them and look at them and think about them. And I sort of came to the conclusion that one of the things that it might be helpful to do in the fashion of my friend Joanna Barnard was to enter it into competitions. So I gave myself a budget of competition entry money. I think I gave myself like £20 a month or something like that. And I started entering it into competitions. And I entered every competition I thought it would be a good fit for, because not every competition is for you. Everything I could think of. And it was the first iteration of it, polished iteration of it, was longlisted for the Bath Children's Novel Award and the Bath Novel Award. It was longlisted in a couple of other places. And then I took the feedback from that, which was gratefully received, and sort of fashioned it again. I got feedback from my collaborator and did another editing pass and sort of tightened things up, added a tiny bit of romance, because in YA, everyone likes a bit of romance.
Yep.
It's kind of a requirement, especially in contemporary YA. And once I was able to do that, it started to get on some shortlists. And then in 2018, it was on 3 or 4 shortlists and won the Yeovil Literary Prize that year, and was shortlisted for the Common Word Prize, which is how I met my agent.
Yeah, and just take a moment just to celebrate those wins as well, because it's a tough old time, isn't it? And so that was obviously a big year for you in terms of that.
Yes. From sort of mid 2017 to mid 2018 was a lot of ups and downs. I got a lot of good responses, and then people would sort of move forward with it and then back off. And then I had, especially on the back of being on shortlists, I had a couple of phone calls with agents who then decided, no, thank you. I had a meeting with an agent in London that was so exciting, and they were so nice, and they were so complimentary. And then they came back to me a few weeks later and said, never mind. And I'll never know why that happened, but that was a struggle to deal with that, because it felt so close. I wasn't just outside the door. I was inside the office and sitting at the table, and they were so nice to me.
That I know those. I mean, that must. I always think that the closer you are, when you then get a rejection, the harder it hits you.
Yes, indeed. Certainly, all the long lists where I didn't make the short list, all the, even to an extent, the, getting requests for fulls, which I didn't get a lot of, actually. And then hearing back, no, none of those were as hard as like being present with someone and feeling wanted, and then being rejected. I've actually spoken to Catherine, my agent, about that situation, and she actually found it a little bit sus the way that went down, and she was like, that's not how that should work. Which was one of the ways that I knew that she was going to be a good agent for me, because she basically said I would never do that to someone. Yeah,
and I know Catherine as well. She's lovely. She's always been so friendly whenever I've chatted to her as well. So pleased you're with her. So you signed with Catherine in 2018 or 2019?
I signed with Catherine at the beginning of 2019 because she found, so I was connected with her through Common Word. Common Word offers a lot of prizes in diversity, and they have one prize that's for young adult fiction, where the fiction is diverse. The authors don't necessarily need to be diverse. And I didn't win, which was fine. But I started speaking to Catherine after that. And what she did was find a U.S. rights agent who was interested in trying to sell it in the U.S. first because she thought that was necessary, which was sort of funny because when she said that, I didn't realize she was offering me representation. I thought she was just trying to help me because I didn't understand what a U.S. rights agent versus a literary agent, foreign right. I had no idea. And I got off the phone with her and had to call a couple friends and go, what does this mean? And they were like, she's offering you representation. I'm like, no, she didn't say that. I'm like, yes, she did. She did. That's what she said.
So that
like forwarding the email to everyone going, what does this mean?
But that's great though, because that's obviously another big win, isn't it? Is when you get to that stage. So how did you feel when you finally worked out that Catherine was offering you representation?
Oh, great. It's, when is it not nice to be wanted in that space? Obviously not in every space, but in that space, it's just nice when someone says that they like your work and they like it enough, because that is the constant echo of rejection. I didn't like this enough. I didn't like this enough. I enjoyed your character. I enjoyed your plot, but I didn't like it enough to want to represent it. I didn't like it enough to put it forward for whatever. And it's just so often you just want someone to say that they like it enough.
I know, so frustrating. And I think there'll be people listening to this podcast who will have had those exact emails and will very much relate to what you're saying. So, yeah, you signed with Catherine then, which is brilliant. Great news. Things are on the up. What happened next? Did you start sending the manuscript out to places?
Yes, so we started, first we talked about whether there were any changes or tightening that could have been done, so a little bit of editorial. And then but the U.S. rights agent was pretty happy to go ahead out with it fairly soon after I signed. So I think it was in the summer of 2019 that it went out. And maybe end of the summer of 2019 that it went out to publishers through the U.S. rights agent. I think it went out to 8 on its first round of submission, and sort of slowly through the autumn came the rejections of I don't like it enough. Just never escaped those words, I think. And some people had questions because of issues of own voices and things like that, and some of which were perfectly legitimate.
Yeah.
And this was when I started to get into more serious discussions with my collaborator about putting her name on it and how we could do that. And political climate in America shifted a bit, and she also, her circumstances in the United States changed, as well as some circumstances of her parents. And so after that round of submission, which went nowhere, there was some good feedback. Lots of people said that it was nice, that they liked it. There wasn't a lot of constructive feedback. I would say that a good agent is often a little bit more generous with constructive feedback than editors from publishing companies, in my experience thus far, which is, of course, limited. But there wasn't a ton of constructive feedback other than perhaps more romance, perhaps less political. Some people said it was just too sad. I mean, it's heavy subject matter. It wasn't, a light, fluffy story about being an undocumented person living in constant fear of arrest and deportation. So we talked about ways that we could enhance it or change it. I tried to do some edits for that. The first couple of editing passes I did were not very successful. I think it had been too long and too close, and I didn't have the skills to do, I think, maybe what needed to be done. And then by the time I worked it out and figured out what to do and got my feet under me and got a good edit going, then the COVID comes. And so it did go out on a second round of submission, but that was no more fruitful, and that sort of fell apart. The U.S. rights agent moved from being a rights agent into being a full literary agent. She went to work for Rosemary Stamuli, and she just said, I'm a rights agent now. And so that relationship kind of fell apart, and then I was left with nothing.
And so obviously that's obviously as we were talking about earlier on, you were quite close, and then um, obviously it didn't happen. That's obviously the hardest kind of rejection to get at that stage. What were you thinking? Were you thinking, okay, it's time to move on, I'll go into something else, or were you thinking, oh, I don't know if this writing thing is for me, or where was your head at that stage?
I mean, there were certainly days where I thought, should I really be trying so hard to be a writer and to be published? And I could just write for myself and enjoy myself. And I could still be a member of a writing group and not try to be published. There are two members of my writing group who are published, others who write for themselves, and others who are self-published. But mostly, I still wanted to do it. And of course, I had the added burden of that sense of responsibility to my collaborator on that novel, who we eventually sort of billed as my co-author because of her contribution to the voice of the main character. And under that kind of designation, co-author felt very appropriate because it was very much, that main character anyway, was very much her voice. So I didn't want to let her down. She wanted to continue, of course. She said, maybe we could do this, maybe we could do that. But at the end of the day, Catherine and some other people I know sort of said, maybe this is a second novel as far as publishing goes. Publishers right now are very slow. I mean, publishing is slow anyway, just so slow. And that's only gotten worse because of COVID. And also very careful, especially when it comes to issues falling under diversity and voices and things that are for whatever reason marked as controversial, whether they should be controversial or not. And then I got an idea for something else, and I got excited about that idea. And that is just the best medicine for anything, really. I mean, for me, just as a human, the best medicine is like, oh, I have something I want to write.
I honestly don't think anything beats that like new idea or that new book buzz that you get.
Yeah. I was grumpy on Monday, and I just was like, I'm just going to sit down and write. I'm not going to do any housework. I'm not going to do any errands. I'm not going to do any of this other work that I have to do. I'm just going to sit my butt down and write. And it's a really good feeling when you can get into the flow. And as someone who works from home, and I'm also a mom, it can be difficult just parenting on a regular basis, even when you don't have another full-time job, can ruin your flow. So any opportunity to get into that flow is good. So so I came up with a new idea. I talked to Catherine about it. She really liked it. She liked the concept. It ended up kind of turning out as a novel a bit different than the concept, which happens. I tend to write first and then in a chunk and get to sort of around, I don't know, kind of tends to be maybe around 20 or 30,000 words. And then I step back and then I plot. I know who are these people? Where are they going? What are they doing? And then I go back to writing, and things changed a little bit. But she has it now. She's read it once. She had some editorial comments on it. I've sent her some very rough edits on things that I might do to it to make it ready to go out again, so that I can hear some more about how people don't like it enough. Maybe.
But it's still exciting though, isn't it? Just the prospect of something you've poured your heart into for however long, and it's got an opportunity to be read by the people who could potentially publish.
Yes.
So that's really cool. So obviously you'll await the outcome of that. But in the meantime, I wanted to ask you about what from obviously all that experience you have over the last sort of 10, 12 years or so that you've been seriously writing. What experience, advice, tips have you picked up that you might be able to share with others who are maybe closer to the start of that journey?
Well, the other one, the first one I sort of mentioned before, is when you think you're ready to query, you're probably not. Take a step back, think about that. There are a lot of people who like to write in isolation, and who don't often share their work. And that is definitely a way to do it. It's not the way for me. And when I worked in isolation, even with just sort of sharing with one or two people and getting some, nods and smiles from friends who are like, I liked it, that is quite different from getting critical feedback. And whether that's critical feedback from an editorial service or a writing group, or finding critique partners, or using all of the many resources of Write Mentor, which are wonderful. And because I did a couple of different things, like the Write Mentor mentorship. I did some short courses. I did, again, I sort of set myself a budget of what I could spend on improving my writing, and whether that was sort of an online course or an in-person thing. I'm very privileged in the fact that I didn't have to balance it with another full-time job. I've worked part-time off and on. I worked for Cornerstones for a little while. But just finding ways to grow is really important. And that's very difficult to do by yourself. And so finding a community, I think we've talked a lot about the community, not just of Write Mentor, but the sort of writer friend group you have. I think we all have a WhatsApp group. I have a WhatsApp group called Writers Retreating. And I have another little group called Ink and Paper. And, it just, you need it for the rejections. You need it for all the time someone says, I don't like it enough. But you also need it for, I came up with this opening line. What do you think? And then everyone goes, yes, that's brilliant. Go. You need someone to help you, who says, keep going. But as far as pursuit after that, and as querying goes, rejection goes, and rejection comes at every level, as I have demonstrated. The thing to know, I think, is that you can't get rejected unless you're putting yourself out there. And I went to a workshop once with Mallory Blackman, and she said, you should be aiming for rejection. Set yourself a goal and aim for some rejection. And then I think I read something similar around the same time, and I was just like, yeah, I'm going to aim for 100 rejections. And I think that was 2017 when I aimed for 100 rejections. I got them. But I mean, all total over querying, I think. So I queried my first novel, but not a lot. But querying 2 separate novels, I definitely rocked up 100 rejections. I have a spreadsheet. I know who did me wrong. I know who never answered me, but I know who answered me. I know who to tell people. And like, if you want to query an agent who will give you a fast answer and might actually say something nice, here's who to talk to. And you can't get that kind of information without community and without putting yourself out to be a part of a community. And I think that's really important. You can meet writers who make really cool jewelry. So this says Persist. I know you can't quite read it, but this is from a writer called Sarah Day. She has her own little jewelry line. And we happen to have gone to the same high school, weirdly enough, even though she lives here and I live here now. It's very strange. Small world.
Yeah. Wow. Is that all writing related jewelry that she does?
No, she does other things as well. So a lot of it's sort of feminist political stuff. Yeah. But she I think she's definitely promoted. She started out with these that said Persist. Oh, I can't remember. Some of them are a bit rude. If you're into a bit of rude jewelry. But she makes them with her daughter. She has an Instagram account. And I'm not going to be able to remember what it's called. I'm terrible at promotion.
That's fine. I'm sure if people are keen to look for it, they'll find Sarah.
You can message me on Twitter. I'll tell you.
Brilliant. Okay, Claire, it's been really wonderful talking to you. I've really enjoyed it, learning a bit more about your journey. I didn't know a lot of the details there, even though we've obviously been chatting for a little while online. And it's great to hear that you're obviously got the new project, which is going to be going out to publishers soon, hopefully. So
probably 2 or 3 months, I think. I'd like it to go tomorrow, but I think it'll probably be January or February.
Yeah, the slow mechanics of the publishing world.
Yes. But, and don't cut this out if you have the power to cut these things out.
Yeah.
I want to say thank you to you, sir, because you run a wonderful ship. And I know that you have lots of people who help you, but you started pretty much just you. And I am still in touch with many of the people I met through Right Mentor, and I still plug into the Right Mentor chats whenever I can on Twitter and stuff. And it's brilliant. And a lot of that is down to you. And I want to say thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to be all awkward now because I don't really, I don't deal with compliments very well. But yeah, thanks for, but thanks for joining me and chatting to me today, Claire. And yeah, this is actually the last episode of the second season, so a really, really good one to go out on. And I hope everyone's found the advice and the story really interesting. Thanks, Claire.
I hope so as well. Thank you.